Welcome to episode number 345 of the Train Your Brain podcast. I'm your host and resident functional neurologist, Dr. Michael Trayford, here to show you how to build a better brain and live a better life. This program is designed to deliver the latest knowledge, tips, tricks, advice, and interviews in the realm of functional neurology and beyond, so that you can build the best brain possible. Struggles with brain function are all too real for so many, and the choices you make today determine how well your greatest asset will serve you at any stage of life. So what I'd like to do right off the bat here is we've had the great opportunity of an awesome company offering to sponsor our program today. So just want to tell you a little bit about a tool that is near and dear to our heart and something that we use every day in clinical practice. We're proud to announce that Shedlight Cold Lasers has been sponsoring, will be sponsoring this program and programs in the future. And they are distributor of Avant lasers and led by one of the leading experts in photobiomodulation, Dr. Brandon Crawford. Dr. Crawford has put together a phenomenal team of amazing humans whose purpose is not just to sell lasers, but provide the knowledge and support needed to get results. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. Do these things work? And absolutely they do. And they have a team that will ensure they work for you. From traumatic brain injury to pimples, yes, there are applications for pimples and skin conditions. Infertility to chronic pain. This company does an outstanding job of educating doctors and the public on the uses of this remarkable tool. We do use these every day in clinical practice, primarily for traumatic brain injury and associated challenges, muscle spasticity, pain, headaches, visual dysfunctions, you name it. So the tool is incredibly versatile, has many applications, and we're certainly here to talk with folks about those applications should they be interested. And as a special offer, Shedlight is offering a $150 discount on their process and product for listeners of this episode. So just mention my name, Dr. Trayford, or last name Trayford, when you decide to talk to them, and they will go ahead and take that $150 off your order. And they've kindly negotiated that special offer with their parent company. So for more information on Shedlight, you can simply Google Shedlight Lasers or call Miss Holly Carey at 518-338-6658, or simply email shedlightinformation@gmail.com. All one word, shedlightinformation@gmail.com. Now, I'm real excited. You can see this gentleman sitting in the wings here, patiently waiting to come aboard. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a quick introduction. This man has been through a lot, and we could read pages and pages, but just want to give you a brief synopsis on my special guest today, Leigh Ramsdell. This is a very special show for me because Leigh has done and still does much of what I started doing when I was younger and was a huge passion of mine growing up. I simply did not follow it through to the level that he did. So I live vicariously through this man right here, even in his retirement. But Leigh Ramsdell is a professional BMX rider from Raleigh, North Carolina. He started riding about age 14 and turned pro at 23. Leigh was sponsored by major bike manufacturers, as well as the likes of Vans, Airwalk, and DC. He's been every summer to the X Games in some capacity since inception in 1995, either as a rider, ESPN reporter, judge, or team manager. This is really cool too. Not many people can say they are in a video game, right? Many people play video games. I'm not a big video game guy myself, but Leigh was also featured as a character in both Dave Mirra BMX video games, as well as doing 2 summers of the Vans Warped Tour. Also started a clothing company called Useless in the early 90s, which he wound up moving away from to get into where he's at now. Leigh has finally moved into, at this current stage of his life, in the marketing side of BMX and is working at the legendary bicycle brand Mongoose. Everybody knows Mongoose. And he's their sports marketing manager, which includes duties such as managing sponsored athletes and handling social media and consulting. Leigh is currently married with a daughter, still riding BMX and mountain bikes as much as he can. And I'm really, really excited to have Leigh here because overall, all that aside, Leigh is just a really super guy, fun guy, and has a lot to offer. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome, Leigh.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here and glad to chat it up. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we really appreciate you being here. And the talk for our day today is the BMX Brain, right? I've been there. I know you've been there. And so many people, and this extends far beyond BMX, but there are significant understandings that are necessary, challenges that are apparent in the extreme sports. So we could even just call this an extreme sports episode, but since we're talking with a BMX dude, we're going to call it the BMX Brain. So why don't you, tell the listeners, Leigh, a little bit about kind of what led to us meeting, a little bit of backstory about your career in BMX and, what it led to sort of present day before we met and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, it's BMX started as I just saw a guy riding a bike down the street and hitting a ramp, and it looked fun, so I started doing that. And I mean, doing stuff like BMX, especially, you're bound to fall, you're going to get hurt, and unfortunately, you're going to hit your head from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, and even until my early 30s, I would do a lot of this without a helmet, which was pretty dumb on my part. And it's I wore a helmet when I rode ramps, but you'd be riding down the street just trying some tricks, and even the little falls are a lot of times what will get you. And I've had numerous concussions, and it's just one of those things. You hit your head, you kind of laugh it off, and you feel fuzzy for a little bit, but throughout the years it takes a toll. And it's not always I don't think sometimes you don't see it yourself, but it's other people that know you that can see it a little bit more. And then my wife definitely noticed that from when she met me until, to now, how that's changed a little bit. And we just started talking about it and discussing the whole head injuries, and, the CTE stuff is coming out. And so she saw you on Instagram and just read about all the good stuff you guys did. So let's try it out. And then made a phone call, and here we are.
Right, right. Well, thank you for that. And you kind of speak to getting the bell rung, right? Especially when we're young and invincible, you hit the head, you get a little bit dizzy, you might even pass out. And some people actually think that's kind of cool when you pass out and get dizzy. I clearly have gotten to the point in my life where I realize it's not so cool. And but for this, I think if we are having particularly the youth of the sports, of the extreme sports listening, that it's imperative to address these things no matter how mild they seem, because getting your bell rung is not a good thing, right?
No, and we saw that too in the beginning of being. You go to a contest, and they usually when you're riding it, you get like 2 or 3 runs, just depending on what contest it was. And there's times where you would fall during your first run, you'd hit your head. I mean, you're wearing a helmet, but you hit your head, and you might get a little dizzy. You go back up, wait till your turn, you hear your name, you drop in and do it again, which is super dangerous. If you hit your head again, that's that could really mess you up. And I've seen it happen. But since then, there's been a lot, like all the major events, there's protocol now. If somebody hits their head, they do the concussion test, and if you show any signs of concussion, they pull you out and you cannot ride anymore. In the event, which is small, but it wasn't like that when we first started.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen people get completely knocked out cold, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what's he doing back?
Yeah. And a lot of those videos are available on YouTube too. You could see them. I remember that, falling from 15 feet in the air, hitting the ground. And, clearly there's people that have 5-mile-an-hour fender benders and wind up with severe concussions. So naturally, any fall from that height or even a smaller height can really produce significant damage. But yes, it is great that protocols are in place. And there's also challenges with that too, in any sport, really, because there's this something, we were going to talk about, might as well talk about it now, this kind of culture of non-reporting, right? So if somebody does get their bell rung, and particularly if they're in competition situation, they might not be so inclined to say they feel dizzy or they're having double vision or they're having a headache or they're having whatever, because they want to get in there for the next drop and make sure they don't lose points, right?
Right, and that's the problem too. Is now that they know that they're getting that concussion test, they try to trick it. So it's they don't. I don't think they realize how dangerous that can actually be if they hit their head again.
Right.
Like during the same contest.
So tell me, I think it would be good, particularly for the folks that may have only had 1 or 2, which is clearly too much or too many concussions. But to the point that you got to where your wife saw what we were doing and said, hey, you need to do this, Leigh. What were you dealing with at that point in your life with the history of one after the next, after the next, after the next? Where were you at with regard to symptoms? What were you dealing with?
A lot of it was a little bit hard for me to get my words out, smoothly and clearly. And I was getting agitated a lot easier,
Right.
like where, just set off easier and being agitated. And especially if I had hit myself recently, I'd stare off a little bit. And, so it was, I mean, nothing, you wouldn't call it huge, where if I just met you and talked to you, you probably would have no idea. But the fact that, we've been together, she can see those gradual changes. And obviously, when you're with your family, I think you show yourself a little bit more than you do with somebody
Right.
you just meet.
Yeah,
So it was
absolutely.
like, I think the being irritated a lot, and then just not being able to get my thoughts out. And then when that doesn't happen, I get aggravated with that as well.
Right, right. And naturally, some people can have those things early on in concussion, but those are typically later symptoms, post-concussion syndrome, which could be anywhere from a couple of months to many years after concussion, particularly repeated concussions. A lot of people are dealing with the early things of dizziness, lightheadedness, headaches, visual problems, etc. Were you dealing with many of the physical symptoms?
I mean, I would after I would get a concussion. There's one concussion I had where my vision was blurred for like a week.
Right.
And I went to an eye doctor, and there happened to be a nurse there, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you had a concussion." But like anything, just we try to, like, all right, it'll get better.
Right.
And
Right.
so, but I didn't get very many headaches or anything like that. Just sporadically, or light was fine. I could see light, and it didn't bother me. But it was mostly, I think, mentally, not mentally, but just like
Right.
the agitation and the trying to get my words out.
Right. And it was primarily what most people do every time you hit the head. It was that wait and see approach, wait for the symptoms to go away. Sometimes they will. And some people just simply take concussions better than others. I mean, just knowing knowing your history, you tended to, kind of recover a little bit quicker, although had lingering symptoms. Some people, they're kind of one and done, where they have one concussion and they're out of school, out of work, out of all kinds of, out of life, really, because it's so overwhelming with the constellation of signs and symptoms. Now, you said something about the doctors, the nurses, and this is something, excuse me, you've told me personally. But tell me about your experience with kind of the conventional approaches. You go either to the emergency room or wherever, and what happens? What happens?
Well, just recently, today, 6 weeks ago, I had a pretty bad crash. Just something I do all the time, and then just a slight error, and I knocked myself out for about 15 seconds. But I also collapsed my lung, broke some ribs, and I went to the emergency room, got there, and I will tell them I hit my head. I was out for 15 seconds, and I showed them a picture. I have a picture of my helmet that's cracked right down the
Yeah.
half of it, and obviously they're going to treat my lung, which was collapsed, and my ribs, and take care of all those things. But I brought it numerous times. I hit my head, not once. I did one initial CT scan, make sure there was nothing broken, which it's all good, but there was nothing ever brought up about my head being hit, or if we should do anything about it. And then even when I went to my follow up to my regular doctor, I told her that, and she's like, "Yeah, that's kind of how it goes." And just a little irritated that that's how it goes. That
Right.
there's no proactive type of, nobody does anything for it. Just wait and see. But then it can be too late.
Right, right. And that is, like you said, it's the critical scenarios that they're trying to overcome: collapsed lung, broken bones, etc. But generally speaking, those are the things that heal quite readily and rapidly. And there needs to be more
Yeah.
emphasis. Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about it. This is, how long ago, and your lung is already better, and your bones are already mending. This is
Yeah.
fantastic. But the
And, and,
one,
and
yeah,
oh, sorry, I was going to say, like, but in the emergency room, like the day after it happened, my wife contacted you, and you guys sprang in. You got me that laser that you were just talking about in the beginning, and so we did stuff. I mean, just showing that there is things that you can do,
right.
you know, to beforehand, before you don't have to wait and see. You can start doing things to help.
Right. And also too, that's important that you say that, because there are windows of opportunity. The first 24, 48, 72 hours are critical for dealing with things. So the fallout is not as great as it would be in many cases. So, if we can get laser therapies activated, if we can get metabolic and nutritional therapies activated, we can make differences before the major fallout. And oftentimes people don't need to come through care if we're able to do things up front. But it's usually, this post-concussion syndrome after people have, done the wait and see approach, which is the norm, unfortunately. But I think that's the thing. These are, quote unquote, silent injuries. So they can't be seen from the outside, or they can't be imaged like a collapsed lung or a broken bone. And then it's just, waiting to see if somebody develops symptoms. And then even at that time, when people do develop them, particularly like a case like yours, Leigh, people start talking about short fuses and other things like that. What's the next step? Then it's go to see the psychiatrist or psychologist and start some counseling, possibly, in many cases, people getting on medications for anxiety and all kinds of things. But by and large, these symptoms that come way down the line are not being related to the concussion in the first place. So the good thing is when we can treat these things early, we may not see some of that stuff on the back end. So critically important, and there needs to be a significant shift in the way these things are looked at. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So tell me, can you speak to, being retired now from the sport, that culture of non-reporting? I did a lot of look into this, and it really started, the understanding of the culture of non-reporting came, initially from football, particularly college football. And then there were a couple of major incidents where, quarterbacks in particular were let back into a game after they already sustained a concussion, and the results were disastrous, absolutely disastrous. But also too, we're seeing it in many other sports, clearly any kind of contact sports. But this culture of non-reporting I've run into in the NASCAR arena. We've known some folks in the NASCAR arena that we've consulted with, and they don't say much about the injuries that they sustain, because then they can't be in that race next Saturday or Sunday. So what's your experience with that culture of non-reporting? Because I think this is so important for people to understand that, this next little win is not worth the rest of your life.
Right, and it's not. And it's not always in just the competition format either, because there's a lot of guys that are out there that what's called street riding, where you just ride down the street, you hit curbs or a handrail, or you'll hit some stuff that's naturally made in the city, and you can fall and hit your head. So there's nobody even there to report to. I mean, you have your friends, they make sure you're okay. And there's so much of that, and that's one reason why, and people don't wear helmets because it's not cool.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
but then you do move into the competition side. It is being reported more, but the fact that it's, you still have the guys that are trying to trick it because they're worried. And now with the Olympics being involved, where it's more important to people and to their countries, it's just, I feel like people really want to get back, do that next run. But I don't know, and I'd like to think that if I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't try to do that stuff. Because there was an instance where I was riding the gravity games, and I did. I fell, I hit my head. They came out, they asked me where I was, and I just said here. and then they're like, no, where? And I was like, oh, I'm on the ramp. And I realized they wanted me to say the city, so I said the city and the state. And they're like, okay, you can get back on the ride. And I probably shouldn't have, and I just wish that if I had that knowledge, that I would be like, okay, this isn't worth it. There's the next contest.
Right.
There's
Right.
the next event. It's the non-reporting stuff it's scary because it happens. It is getting better in the contest arena, but with the everyday riding, it's still not there, where people just don't understand.
Right.
All right, I hit my head, but let's go out and we can finish our ride if we want. No big deal.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not just competition, it's on the street, because you're trying to pull off a new trick or something, and, you bang the head a little bit, and now you're even, potentially more motivated to get that, that trick completed, or at least before somebody else does. Right. There's that the peer pressure.
Yeah, it's a peer pressure. It's just, you just want to get it done before, like, I remember hurting myself one time, and my friend's like, oh, get up, go do it. And I was like, no, I can't. My I can't move my foot, like, but and they weren't doing it in any way to be mean or anything. That's just
Right.
everybody trying to push you to do it. But still, if everybody just knew, especially with the head stuff, they just
Yeah.
let's take it back. And there are people that do know are a little older and have hit their head or seen those bad things happen. But it would be good to know that ahead of time before you have to see any of that.
Yes, yes. If we had the wisdom up front, that would be a beautiful thing
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, I'm feeling the results of my many hits to the head between, BMX and then motorcycles after. I've had more than my fair share too, and there are times where I struggle, and thank goodness I have resources to deal with those struggles. But the struggle is real, as they say.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me, you mentioned CTE before. So those that don't know, CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is, was portrayed in the movie Concussion several years back. And there are a lot of great studies going on, mostly up in the Northeast in Massachusetts, where they have the brain banks where primarily athletes are donating their brains, primarily football players are donating their brains for investigation of certain proteins that develop when people have had repetitive hits to the head. And it's certainly known and has been shown through the BMX world that there are brains that have been investigated and certain riders that show these tau proteins as well. So what's your kind of experience, concerns, et cetera, with CTE? Have you done much research in that area?
A little bit. I like to. My wife has done more than I have, but she's more concerned for me than probably I am. I mean, I think it's just natural for you to
Yeah.
be concerned for somebody, But then when you see when you have friends and colleagues and stuff that like Dave Mary, that's
Yeah.
he was diagnosed with CTE, and it just kind of makes you sit up and think about it and do a little more research and try to just try to understand it more. But it's just like one of those things where some people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be like, why I don't want to have it or I don't want that. So it's just kind of bad that right now that stuff still seems a little taboo to talk about.
Right.
Because you don't I mean, I've hit my head enough where, I know there's some damage in there, but it's I think it's better if more people can be open and talk to one another about CT and head injuries in general.
Right. And there does. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's just funny that people talk all the time about like, oh, I broke my bone, I broke this, but then when it comes to mental health and
Yeah.
head injuries, people are kind of like to shy away from that, where it shouldn't be like.
Right.
And I think it's just because they're either embarrassed or worried that people are gonna look at them funny because they're like, oh, I got something mentally wrong or
Right.
something in my head. The
Yeah.
muscle, just like any other muscle, needs to be, or organ needs to be treated.
Yeah, it's especially guys, hey, look at this scar or look at this whatever, it's a badge of courage. But when your brain is injured, yes, it is complete silence. And I appreciate you bringing that up about the CTE. And I unfortunately didn't have the chance of meeting Dave. I met some many other names in the world. He was a bit after my time, but I just remember that vividly. I believe it was 2016, even reading the big article in Rolling Stone after talking about this, the tragic legacy. And unfortunately, we're living in a world right now where information travels so fast that even when something devastating like that happens, the conversation stops, right? And we need to keep that conversation going because BMX, extreme sports in general, as people push harder, and trying to get whatever it is, be it the sponsorships or the lofty financial gains, et cetera. Things have changed a lot since I was in it, and I'm sure to a degree since you've been in it. But there are people. I remember reading that article, and Dave was saying, all these people that were saying, I would die to pull that trick, or I would die. They would talk in these terms that they would do anything to get that, get to that next level so they could get that sponsorship, get up the rankings, et cetera. But it goes across all sports, and there's a tremendous danger to that. Clearly BMX is one of the sports that I see that most people do it, the vast majority, if not all, do it for the pure love of it. But it's been tainted by the other stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because like most people do it because it's a personal goal. You know, it's
Yeah,
BMX isn't like basketball or football or even skateboard. Like that, the money's not quite. People are doing it more for their personal gain than a financial gain for sure. I mean, definitely in the heat of the moment at a contest, that can come into play a little bit, but it's just that personal moment where you're like, I mean, I remember the one time when I knocked myself cold, like it was a two-part trick, and I was like, all right, if I pull this first rail, I'm going to keep going and try this other part, this other ledge, and then in my mind, I'm not thinking of safety. I'm just like, I just want to do this.
right.
And then I'm waking up, to somebody yelling my name. It's just one of those things. Is like, you think about it after the fact, but it's, yeah. So I mean, there was no financial gain whatsoever in that.
Right.
It's just personal. You just want to do it so bad that there's that risk involved that you just throw to the side.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Well,
and that's part of progression, but at the same time, you can be a little safer about it
right.
with helmets and
Yeah.
knowledge.
And hopefully the conversations can be had. We can find a way to have that common ground with the youth of the sport and the wisdom of the sport, because unfortunately these cycles will continue. There will be more tragic events. Not just the injuries themselves, but the fallout from those injuries. And again, not just BMX, but every sport. We see it in football all the time, where there's there's significant repercussions of chronic concussion and post-concussion syndrome. So tell me, how, your wife had kind of found a way to get you here, and we're glad that you did, and I believe at this point you're glad you did. So why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about what it is that you did, and what the outcomes were for you in your words.
But I remember, I kind of went there. My wife did a lot of research, with you guys, Apex Brain Centers, and I didn't do much. I kind of want to go in there without much knowledge. I just wanted to see what you guys had to say, and you set me down. We had a general conversation, and then I was there for a 5-day program, and then it's funny because a few of the things we started to do, I was like, this is helping my brain. But you realize that the hand-eye coordination, and all that, like what's the one where you're on the screen and you're hitting the buttons, as
Oh,
they come up.
yeah,
What did I have to?
the neurosensory motor integrator, that one.
Yeah, and it's like the first day you're there, you do all this stuff, and we did the crossing the hands with the legs, and then what's the clapping one?
Interactive metronome. Yeah.
Yes, the metronome. Yes, and then I just remember doing those, and then I didn't really get it until the second day I got there, because then it's like you see your progression, and I could actually feel my brain getting tired. Like I went back and I just slept really good, and then like just all the little things. It's just like that you just don't even think about the breathing. Just simple little things that help your brain.
Right.
And I just remember also there was remember seeing it because at the same time there you had another patient in there that I think was in a motorcycle accident but had leg problems, and I remember him trying to put a beanbag with his foot into a little trash can.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, this is impossible. And then I remember 2 days later he did it, and then you
Right.
can see his eyes water, and it's just seeing how these little things can really help your brain, your hand, your coordination, just your body working with your brain and get things
Right.
firing again.
Yeah.
Really impressive to see that. That was like that image will stick in my head for a while.
And I appreciate you making the connection, and also the connection that many people don't understand is how does all that other stuff, getting more coordinated and all of that impact the things that you were dealing with, like short fuse and maybe even some confusion or not getting words out. But it's that brain body connection, right? That thing that sounds so far out there, but I think that's kind of what you experienced, was doing all the stuff through the physical body actually impacted, how you think, how you feel, and all of that, right?
Yeah, and the eye exercises that I was doing too, and I was like, I do those daily still, and it's like
Awesome.
it's it's just it's just funny how they seem so simple, And then it just like, it kind of, it just clicks.
Right,
So,
right. That's awesome. So yeah, that kind of leads into what are you, what are you doing now to kind of keep aside from your, your pretty much daily following your passion of riding on two wheels, but what do you do now to keep your brain healthy?
I've been, one thing I do too, and this is like, it's one of those things that people say, don't do electronics, but ever since I saw you, like, I keep my phone plugged in out in the kitchen. I never bring it back to the bedroom with me. And I try to make sure I'm done with electronics for a while. So, and I started reading real books instead of my Nook.
Nice.
Sorry, I hope Nook's not going to be a sponsor, because then they'll be bummed. But um, so yeah, I read real books with a light now. Like just a small little light, and do all the exercises that you gave me, like all the mental ones. And then one thing I never thought I'd ever do was meditate.
Mhm.
It just doesn't seem very action sporty, but it's really helped. And then the
Right.
breathing's really listening to my breath, and breathing, and just taking a moment. Like sometimes my daughter's like, "Oh, what's wrong?" It's like, "Oh, I'm just breathing," because I'm a little bit of a loud breather. So
Right.
I'm just
Right.
like, and that's really, really helped
Yeah.
a lot. Like that's probably my number one thing that I think has helped me, is just the finding my breath, and breathing and learning the meditation.
Right, right. That's great.
It's
That's as they say, that makes my heart happy. And the fact is, everything you're mentioning is very, inexpensive, if not free. It doesn't cost anything to breathe. It doesn't cost anything to meditate. Certainly to keep, you have to have a phone, which costs money, but to leave it in your kitchen costs nothing. Those are the big things that will impact your sleep, which impacts your brain, which, everything is absolutely connected. So, I applaud you and commend you for realizing and making these connections, and, really relying on a lot of the simple, the simple approaches to things, because those are often the most impactful. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's good. And then like after I just recently got injured, you guys, like I got that laser sent to me. That's it's weird, because you put it up and it looks like something out of science fiction. You have this laser on you, but it helped like a lot of things. Like I had that shed light, like had the the all the presets in there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then
I've always got mine handy. I've always got one within reach.
and that's the one I see it. That was that the balance that I can see on your screen,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that one, because I would do that one, I believe, over the ears and in the back of the head. And it's just, it really helped. I think it really helped shorten my time with the
Yeah.
head injury. And one thing too I noticed with this head injury, and I don't know if it was because I was doing all this stuff proactively, was like when I came to, I remembered everything. It wasn't that crazy buzz that I get a lot of times and it could have been the type of concussion I got when I was out. But I woke up and I even looked over to the one that, I was like, I remember everything. I mean, I remember the moment my tire hit to hearing my helmet crack, which isn't always good.
No.
Sometimes you don't want to remember that stuff, but I do.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that too, because this is an area where, again, the difference between long-term rehabilitation way after the fact versus something quick you can do up front. This particular tool is, and I'm not saying this just because they're sponsoring the show. I'm saying this because I've seen this happen all the time. There are studies to show that if you can get a low-level laser on the head, hence the brain, within a small window of roughly 48 hours or so, you can cut concussion recovery time in half. So I mean, these are simple, cheap, easy interventions that people can do to minimize the fallout. So being able to do something right up front, that's why when I spoke to you or your wife right after your injury, I said, we've got to get something on your brain ASAP. And, here it is a couple of months later, and you're not having to come in for a program to deal with this concussion on top of all the others you've had, because you did the kind of preemptive strike, right?
Yeah, and I think it really helped. It's one of those things, because I put it up and my friends were like, "What is that?" And I just say, "Oh, it's a low level laser." And it seems like a funny science fiction thing, but it's
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you, just having come from that world, certainly not competing at the level you did, but coming from that world, man, I think everybody should have one in their little, fanny pack under the seat kind of thing. But I know you touched on it. So what would your tip be? We used to, this podcast used to be kind of a 365-day brain tip type of thing. You may have touched on it already, unless you had something else up your sleeve. But if you were to have one kind of tip or trick or exercise, something good for your brain to do, just kind of share with the audience, what would that be for you?
Well, I mean, number one, I really think finding your breath, like
Yeah.
it's the breathing. I really that does really help calm me down and relax, and ride a bicycle and breathe while you're doing that. I really find that relaxing. I mean, obviously not as crazy or stupidly like I would, but as like just going down a bike path and breathing while I do it, just something easy. It's you get the exercise going as well as breathing, and it's so relaxing and can I can be very frustrated with work, and I can go do a bike ride and come back, and I feel better. If I but it does help when I do the breathing as well.
Yeah, well, that's great, and it's also a mindfulness thing, because when you're breathing just by itself, you're naturally more in tune, or when you're focusing on your breathing, you're more in tune to the present moment. But doing that on a bicycle, as long as it's maybe not on a crowded city street or something,
Yeah,
that
yeah, I always do it on a bike path and it's really nice with the trees around me, and
yeah,
you're just just it, it, it feels very meditation-ish,
oh,
hippie-ish, or however
absolutely.
you say it. But I man, I come back and I'm feeling good.
That's neurological rehab right there. Breathing, you're on two wheels, balancing, balance systems, eye movement systems. Everything is kind of happening at one time. Then you got nature around you, dealing with that nature deficit disorder that we all tend to suffer from. So that's phenomenal advice. And then they can work their way up to hitting some jumps and doing tabletops while breathing and all of that at the same time.
Yeah, just wear your helmet.
Yeah, just wear the helmet. Absolutely. See, I grew up, my mom was an intensive care nurse and my dad was a cop. So I was like the only kid in the neighborhood wearing a helmet as we were at the quarter pipe, doing our thing. So I definitely got ribbed a lot, but I also probably saved myself from some pretty significant trauma, because I was one of the ones that was tending to want to go higher than some of the others. And yeah, I did take a lot of serious falls, but and I actually wasn't even a helmet; it was a full face helmet too. So
Yeah, that definitely get made fun of at first when you're younger, but again, save your teeth.
that's it. That's it. I still got them all. No fake ones in there. Well, good deal, Leigh. I so appreciate you. Do you have any kind of parting words or thoughts or wisdom or anything, for the BMX community and the extreme sports community as a whole? What would you say to them, having all of this wisdom now, that you didn't have when you were, 14, 23 and beyond?
Just don't be afraid to talk about your head injuries or your mental health, or just, I mean, talk to somebody about it. It could save you a lot in the long run. I mean, I just think people are still, it's a stigmatism to talk about mental health and head injuries, and it,
Right.
it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's just another part of your body that you're trying to heal and get better.
Yeah.
So
And like you
don't
said,
be
even
afraid.
even if it's something as simple as kind of tripping over your words or reversing words or just not being
Yeah,
able to find the right word, those are extreme symptoms, really, of a more significant underlying problem. It's kind of the smoke before the fire, and we
right.
really want to understand that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
Good deal.
100%.
Well, good deal. Well, we're going to just go ahead and I just want to go over some information. But I thank you so much, Leigh, for being on the show here. And as always, an absolute pleasure talking with you. And keep up the good work that you're doing with Mongoose. And keep up having fun on two wheels. Hopefully, you get back to it a little bit more aggressively as things heal up here.
Yeah, and I appreciate everything you guys do. I really do. Thank you.
You're awesome, brother. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to read a couple of things here, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on this show. I want to also thank Shedlight, our sponsor. Again, to get in touch with them, you can go ahead and just Google Shedlight Lasers. Make sure you mention my last name, Trayford. If you do happen to get into ordering a laser for home use, they will take $150 off that. 518-338-6658 is Mrs. Holly Carey, and she will take really good care of you, as well as Dr. Brandon Crawford and Dr. Griswold, just an amazing team over there. So just want to let you all know the information contained in this production is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. So if you have any questions, please consult your resident functional neurologist or other trusted health provider. You can also find more great episodes of the Train Your Brain podcast on Apple Podcasts or trainyourbrainpodcast.com. One word, Train Your Brain Podcast. Please feel free to write us a review if you love what you're hearing about, and also give us ideas on what you want to hear about in the future. So you can email those ideas through info@apexbraincenters.com, because it's really your feedback that will allow us to give you the programming that you want. You can also learn more about great brain information online at www.apexbraincenters.com. Also search for Apex Brain Centers on social media, primarily Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And that wraps it up for this episode of the Train Your Brain podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Trayford, and I'll see you next time.